So let's look at family businesses survival rate. Going from first generation to second generation, it's like 30%. From second to third, it'll be 12%. And then from third on, it's 3% survival ratio, right?
So welcome to the podcast. We have David Guzman on with us today. Welcome, David.
Hey, how's it going, Brad?
Glad to have you on. So David is essentially Director of Business Development, runs the pre-con there for Continental Marble and Tile Company out there in Southern California, and was fortunate to have David come out. He was actually in town in Phoenix, and we toured a project this week. And then he's name drops. He sends a picture of my high school there in San Diego where he's doing a project.
Yeah.
So my old stomping grounds back at Helix down in La Mesa in California, San Diego.
Yeah, it's funny because this morning our field superintendent was out there and he calls me. He's like, "Man, Helix is way out here." So I was like, "Hey, send me a picture of the sign. I'm gonna send it over to Brad." So
that's good because I'm like, please tell me David's not already driving down there because you're in Corona, so
no,
it's a little hike down to San Diego from there.
yeah, it's a drive, but yeah, we go all the way to Chula Vista, all the way up to Ventura. So we have a huge area that we cover, and then you add in traffic, and it's just a nightmare.
Maybe we start there logistically. I think that's pretty unique. Many people don't have that big of a footprint. I speak to contractors and subs, and some of them are pretty spoiled throughout the country. They're like in a 5-mile radius, which that's not my life. We're probably in a 70-mile
Right.
radius here in Phoenix. For you, I mean, you're way bigger than that, and your congestion and traffic's way bigger than ours. Logistically, how is that just, especially on some of these big projects? I mean, you're working at my alma mater high school, you're doing big projects all over Southern California. How can you
Right.
facilitate? Are they commuting every day? Are you putting them up somewhere? How does that typically work?
So usually, full disclosure, we are a union shop, so we do have kind of a labor pool that we pull from. But like as far as the logistics wise, I mean, we're centralized in Corona. About 15, I mean, we've always done work in San Diego, but about 15, 18 years ago, we did the Marine Corps Recruiting Depot, the MCRD down there. And we redid a bunch of the barracks, and just, a lot of us were commuting I was actually in the field at the time. So I had worked 18 years in the field. So I have a lot of, exposure to the craft, I guess. But we were driving down there. A bunch of us were from, Corona, Chino, Riverside. A lot of us were commuting, but we had met a group of core guys down in San Diego. And then from that point on, we've always, stayed in contact with the builders down there, and we've kept guys in San Diego in that area. So we have like a San Diego crew, an LA crew, Inland Empire crew, just all, we usually keep about, I want to say when it's kind of slower and it's usually about 45 guys. And when it picks up, we had up to 120 guys working for us, so it just depends, on the projects, but we do have a core group of guys that are with us that, we're able to do this type of, work everywhere because of the training that we've, given our guys, and they're our core group of guys. And it's about 40 guys, 45 guys that run work, know how we run the operations. And so, yeah, we used to do a lot of commuting, but now we have labor in all the areas. So it just kind of works out for us.
So what's one of the pros? I think it's pretty rare that I have someone, from the union on here, and I'm very familiar with it, having grown up in San Diego. My dad was a union electrician, for his entire career. For you, it makes sense that you're going to have essentially some crew leaders, some crews kind of space between, as you mentioned, Inland Empire, LA, San Diego, Orange County, that kind of facilitate. But with the union shops, you can locally hire, so as you need to upsize or downsize crews. How has that been just from coordination? Maybe, bringing in new people, making sure that they fit the talent and the quality and the company values per se. I mean, there's some challenges there, even though the union should be vetting those to some extent, so you're getting some pretty qualified talent.
Right. I mean, everything kind of has a purpose, and we do know that they get some type sort of base training and curriculum. They do have, they go to school. I went through the program about, how long I've been in it. I've been in it about 26 years. So I went in the program about, graduated about 22 years ago. So you kind of learn, they do, it's nice because they do have that kind of fundamental, knowledge of the trade. But then, yeah, it's just like everything else. I mean, you're going to have guys that take ownership in their work, and then you have guys that don't, and you just kind of have to weed it out. And I mean, it's it's sometimes it's a difficult water, to navigate because you have all these stipulations that you deal with. You make sure that you're honoring the union stuff that they have, and then at the same time, be able to get a production because you know being a member of the union, it's not like you pay these guys piecework. It's an hourly rate, and it's whether they set 100 feet or 300 feet, they all get paid the same. So it's for those guys that are awesome craftsmen. Sometimes it might be a downer for them, but it does serve a good purpose. It gets them a retirement, gives them great benefits, and so that's great. And we've been in the union for, I think we helped form the union in Southern California, so we've been around it for a long time. We know all the business agents on a first name basis. And so it's nice. Sometimes we'll get referrals, when guys that they know are out of work, they'll reach out to some of the shops that they have relationships with and put us in contact with them.
So how does that work? And I think you bring up a really good point because many trade partners really struggle with, do we pay him piece rate? Do we pay him hourly? There's pros and cons to both, right? You're going to,
Right.
some cases, jeopardize quality or performance. And there's kind of this fine line. Being that everyone's hourly, especially with the union, do you ever find that challenging, especially you being over pre-con? I mean, you're estimating these are big scale projects. Uh, I, I mean, truth be told, you've been in business 100 years, so we'll get to that. So I
Right.
think you have a
Right.
unique
Right. Right.
advantage compared to
Right.
most anyone out there. But how does that change now? Are you seeing a difference in the labor force now? How does that impact pre-con? How does it impact estimating and performance, out in the field?
It's funny because being in business for so long, and full disclosure, this is my wife's family. I kind of married into this business. I've been around it for 26 years, and so I've gotten to meet a lot of the competitors. And like I will say, healthy competition is great for the industry, right? Because I mean, the unhealthy competition is what's going to drive the wages down and drive our value down as builders, right? So the healthy competition, I love talking to those owners, and we'll talk. How one of the guys who's out of Orange County, he'll ask me, how many square feet are you getting out of your guys? Because I mean, it all comes down to like what
Mm-hmm.
the average square footage installation is on these
Mm-hmm.
projects. And so we, in where there's three of, so in our company, there's three of us that deal with, estimating. And some of these large projects, I mean, we have, a lot of discussion over, okay, how we'll literally go through each type of tile and say, okay, this is a mosaic. This is going to take longer than this one. And we'll literally break it down, per tile and how much. And thankfully we have a little bit of experience of installing it, so data is huge. And that's what we're kind of compiling is all this data that we have, and we haven't even compiled 100 years of data. I mean, you're looking over 15 or 20 years of data that we're looking at on square footage, how much they're installing. And so we kind of know these numbers. So going into it, it's like we're as good as our data is, right? And I mean, we can look back every year and you can see that tile setters back in the 80s and 90s, they set a lot. They would float and set tile, fresh set tiles. But we don't do that anymore. Like floating browning walls is rare. In residential, you probably see it a lot, maybe on your projects you do.
Mm-hmm.
But like on the commercial side and the school side, to get a mortar, walls with tile installation is rare now. But we do have guys that can do it still and are trained in that. But so data changes a little bit as trends do, right? Tiles have gotten bigger over the last 10 years, a lot bigger. I mean, I think the project we walked on your house, man, it was pretty cool. All the I don't know how many bathrooms that was, um, but it tile changed. Now we're kind of, it looks like we're going back to like some of these 3x12s and these rectangle mosaics and odd shaped tiles. So we kind of have to look at our data and adjust that. So I mean, the smaller jobs, the cookie cutter stuff, I mean, that's pretty simple to figure out just based on the data, but it's those unique projects that, have 150 tiles on it that we have to go through and kind of fine tune that, that bid based on, the data that we have. So,
Now, do you find any challenges? Maybe walk us through the pay structure in this sense. So, for me, when I worked in California through college, internships down there, of course, the union guys would call us scabs because the shop I worked for wasn't union. But we're working on military bases and schools, prevailing wage jobs there in California. And so, from an employee perspective, being in the field, this as well as in college, I saw a huge difference in motivation of the crews. And what I mean by that is that, if some of the crews were sent to do a private job, so maybe they're working in Little Italy in downtown San Diego for a developer, you know, they're making, at the time, 14 to like 22 bucks an hour, depending on their skill set. Right. And again, this is, 20 years ago, but, and it's a private job, but then they go do a prevailing wage. So then they go work at like the Navy base down in Coronado. They're working at school, and prevailing wage, they're being paid like 32. So of course, as an employer, they would try to monitor that and make sure they're spreading around. So, and just to walk through that explanation, when you're working on a government job, California requires you to pay what they call prevailing wage, and it's a set structure. And so the beneficiary was an employee who would get paid essentially $20 an hour more, just doing the same amount of work. It's just doing a government job as opposed to private. For union, does that differ the pay scale when they're doing a union job or like a government prevailing wage job?
No, see, because so California prevailing wage is much higher than the what is it, the Bacon Davis federal act that
Mm-hmm.
regulates the federal wage. So we pay our guys. I mean, we do private work too, like we do large private, and usually that's because of bondability if it's huge. But we pay our guys. They all get paid the same, whether it's a federal prevailing wage, only because California's prevailing wage is much more is more than the federal prevailing wage. So it kind of we go through, so to break it down, we have like finishers. They get paid a certain wage, and they're usually the guys that set up the tile setters. And we have the tile setters, they get paid a different wage. And then we have apprentices, and they, depending on what period you are, that's based on your pay scale. So
Now, with that said, though, does that impact, because you mentioned that you're going to be the same wage, and part of that's union driven, and we know anyone that has experience with unions, there's union dues and there's an expense there, right? By having a union, there's that aspect of it. But how do you compete on some of these private jobs? Is it because you're bigger, because of bonding? Are they requiring different bonding, and that's going to eliminate some of the competition? Because if you're fighting a non-union shop, that makes it pretty difficult to compete, I'd imagine, just based on the wage scale.
right, no, absolutely. I mean, and that's one of the first questions. Like when we look at these projects, I mean, we do have to, because we all have 24 hours in a day, and we have to manage our time. Like, are we going to bid all these jobs that we're
And
not
get
going to
none of
have a
them.
chance on?
Yeah.
Yeah. Or are we going to go and are we going to bid, the jobs that we have a shot in? So, there are a lot of jobs that will have like, PLA agreements, and those we can compete with. So, we've done hotels, we've done high rises, we've done work in stadiums, and those are all private jobs. But a lot of times they want somebody who's bondable, and some of these other contractors aren't bondable. So that kind of helps out with that as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And so, with that, I mean, that goes back to you. I mean, you're vetting your customers, anyone should, to understand really who you're bidding against. And it's not so much like,
Right.
hey, they're not at the same quality, but I just want to make sure apples to apples, you're offering a totally different skill set, you know,
Right.
a whole different value you're bringing to the client, if you will.
Right. Right. And what's interesting is, because for instance, like we've been like our company, you mentioned we're not 100 yet. Maybe when this episode airs, I think we'll be 100. 2024, we turn 100. Um, my wife and her cousin are the fourth generation in this family business, and my son, who's worked the summers for us, he's going to be the fifth generation. And so it's kind of cool to see that. And he's actually going to school for construction management. He enjoys it, but for us, we go through, we've been a low bid company for 98 years, and we have had a few select customers that we have like really good relationships with. There's a supermarket out here that we do all their stores, and they can opt out and go, private, and get private workers to do it for probably somewhat of a fraction of a cost. I don't know, I would think, but we've done their stores for 40 years or whatever it is. And so we're getting a little bit more from we're keeping that low bid base, so which the nice part for me is like I can go into, these new contractors that we're trying to meet. And I always call it courting, right? We're trying to court these contractors, right? Meet them. Hey, I'd like to bid your work. And I know we're competitive because we've been in the low bid world for 99 years, 98 years. And so now we're kind of expanding into that relationship contracting where, people have a little bit more control over who they're using as subcontractors. And um, for me as a subcontractor, I mean, if you think about it, I have a friend who works for a construction management company that we actually do work for. And he's like, man, you guys, man, these low bid guys, they just want to fight all day over projects, And I'm like, yeah, I try not to fight. I always tell them, I try and take the passive least resistance because it's easier for me and it's easier for you. But as a contractor, if I was doing your homes, and it's a relationship based, there might be some stuff that gets missed, in this because of unforeseen circumstances, right? But with that relationship, I'm probably gonna eat, some of these costs because I'm not gonna try and like, oh, Brad, you missed that, man, like and I think you do, what do you guys do? Cost plus or
Cost
whatever.
plus, yeah.
It might not be as bad, but like on some of these projects where there isn't a whole lot of room in there, we'll facilitate that. You know what I mean? Like we'll come to an agreement and, cause we're not trying to hurt anybody and we're not trying to hold anybody's feet to the fire over plans that maybe weren't, so we're trying to work on that, you know, relationship contract is what I call it with some of these general contractors that we don't normally do business with, that are still in the same space. Our competitors are doing their work, so I know that we can do their work. So it's when I meet people, it's I was telling them like we're Southern California's best kept secret because for a long time we punch out bids like I mean we probably punch out 500 to 600 bids a year, right? And um, just being in the low bid world. And so like we have that covered, but now we have this huge machine that's been developed over, because contracting, I mean, ultimately it's a process, right? You, at least in our world, you submit the bid. Let's say that you win the bid, you go through the front end documents, you go through the production of the product, you go through the back end documents and punch list, send out your warranties, and you rinse and repeat, right? And we're a service. That's all we provide as a service, right? That's what I'm doing for you. My service just happens to be a tile installation service. So with that, I'm kind of in a unique situation. I think me and my wife and my wife's cousin Curtis, we're in a unique situation because we have this monster machine of a company that we can now go and plug in new clients to it. And it's not like we're trying to redevelop anything. We're not trying to, we're just feeding this machine. And we have our quality control, systems in place. We have our delivery systems, but we do have our systems. And it's nice because like if you're starting out, like I listen, I've listened to a few podcasts that you've been on and like, starting out, man, you're taking anything you can get your hands on. It doesn't matter. Like you don't, and you can't take everything on or everything that you'd like to take on, maybe because of size. But like the best part for us is like we're geared to do one restroom on a job or 1,000 restrooms. It doesn't matter. No, like really no job's too small and no job's too big, which is a phenomenal spot to be in because, you know, everything evolves, right? So like if we go through the history of our company, we go back, we were started on September 24th, 1924.
Wow.
It's crazy. Yeah. So our founder, which is my wife and her cousins, what is he? Their great grandfather. He started this company. He actually used to work for a stone quarry out in Utah, and they did a bunch of marble and stone fabrication. And he moved down here. I think it was called Nebo Marble Company. So he moved out to California, and he was working for this Nebo doing these jobs, and then he decided to go out on his own. Like, hey, I think he moved out here in 1920 in Southern California, and then he decided to go out on his own. So he started doing marble, and that was his big thing, was Continental marble. But then he added tile to his scope, right? So he's done stuff like he did some of the first buildings at UCLA. They've done stuff at it's crazy because we've done like multiple remodels on jobs that we did like the original stone and tile. And so it's kind of a cool experience, and then I think it was in like the 40s, if I get my date right, 1948, he had a gnarly heart attack, and he was bedridden. He ended up passing away, I think in like 1951. And my wife's grandfather was in school at the time. He was going to UCLA, and so he stopped because back in those days, it was different. It's not like there was just, if, the work back then, we probably had 4 or 5, regular guys. The craft was different, very intimate as far as the ownership and the guys in the field. Um, and so he felt like, oh, I can't, let this business close. So he took it on as an owner because he felt like these guys were part of his family. So he kept the business going. um, and then I don't know what year. It's funny because I try not to. I try not to be like, oh, my Aunt Patty and my Uncle George, when they're the owners. So I would say, oh, our owners, because
Totally.
we are a real family business. So they took the company over, and we've gone through our ups and downs. We went through the experience of where business, the handshake meant something to where, hey, where's your documentation? Where's your change orders that are signed? Where's your, I didn't authorize that, and so that was a financially difficult time to navigate, but we made it through there. We made it through a few depressions. We've made it through some recessions,
Well, in
and
fairness, if I interrupt you, David, what's interesting
yeah.
about the handshake comment is anyone that's worked in commercial is so much about CYA anymore. Like you're just enveloped in paperwork and preventing litigation, staying out of litigation and liquidated damages. I mean, it's such a high risk, cutthroat, very strenuous, and as you mentioned, I mean, that's where it can be contentious too because you're fighting through there's just a lot of paperwork on anyone that's done commercial, and so you're fighting through that, and so handshakes definitely, I'm sure, changed over time to what it is today.
Oh, right. And but what's crazy is, so well, we're going to circle back to that because I do want to talk about that. But let me finish our history, and we'll get right back into that. The handshake and the
Mm-hmm.
CYA mentality, because that is like the truest statement you can make about it. But so then once, George and Patty took the company over, and they're a brother and sister. They're not a husband and wife. They took the company over and they ran it for, oh gosh, I don't know, 40 years or so, 35 years, and they're in their early and mid 60s, and they're in the process of trying to figure out this exit plan, for themselves, and you can't imagine that you can't imagine how difficult that must be for them. Like this has been like, I mean,
A
you have like
baby.
three,
Mm-hmm.
well, you have like 342 businesses. I know, right? So, so like you understand how much you're invested in these businesses. They're like a second marriage to you. Because it's like the phone rings, you're going to pick it up. You're not going to be like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, sorry. Hey, timeout on the basketball. I know I'm coaching, but let me get this call. It's like your wife's calling. You got to pick it up, man.
Yeah.
So I know we're transitioning. We're actually in that transition period now. It's kind of, trying to figure out, how to navigate the waters, of that transition. But, and so there's three of us. There's me, my wife, and her cousin, and we're gonna, pick up the reins and run with it, and it'll be exciting. But it's a beautiful history, if and it's cool. And when I tell people, like I always tell them, we're a family business, and it's funny because we did these four high rise towers, right, and they're all in one footprint. It's this massive development. It's called Metropolis down in downtown LA, and we did the first tower, and our owners were meeting. Our owners meaning Aunt Patty and Uncle George, right? But our owners were meeting with these foreign owners. They're from China. Well, you know, the builder was very unfamiliar with us, and the owners went with us, and the builders, when me and the project engineer were walking the punch list on the first tower, and he's like, hey man, like, I'm not going to lie, we hear family business, we were in panic mode because we think, he's like, maybe you shouldn't lead with that. And I was like, no, I always lead with it, but I clarify, like, we've been around for a while. We are a genuine family business. We have, in the office, there's one, two, three, four, five, six of us that are all, from the, that are related, and married, and so forth. So, um, and it's been great. And then, like I said, we have the fifth generation who's actually going to get a degree in construction management. The three of the males in here that are family, we were all field raised, right? Rough around the collar, I set for just about 18 years. So I know the trade in and out. But here's that adjustment in that, we talked about when the industry changed from a handshake to paperwork. Now it's changed from plans to digital. Everything is digital. Like we have one estimator who's, he's in his late 60s. he still does it all through paper and with a ruler. And I'm like, I don't know how you do that. And then we have me and the other estimator who do nothing but digital stuff, all takeoffs with in-house, spreadsheets that have been developed. And so it's an interesting dynamic, switching from one generation to the next. It's been interesting. So.
Do you find it tough just the family? I know you're through it. It's your wife's family, so I'm sure there's been some adaptation and transition there as you've entered the company, as an in-law, if you will. But how is that with 6 of the employees being family members? Do you ever find any difficulty in navigating decisions, scope, direction of the company?
Um, so I think that's okay. So let's look at family businesses, right? I think going from first generation to second generation is like 30%, and they just did a new calculation. It's more like 19% succeed to that from first to second, and then from second to third, it's 12%, and then from third, or actually from second to third will be 12%, and then survival rate, and then from third on it's 3% survival ratio, right? And I can see, but see, like I'm not like I'm kind of new blood to this, right? This whole thing. Technically, I wasn't raised as a tile setter son. My son was, but I wasn't, right? So I'm kind of new blood to this, which I think that's actually kind of good for it. Is when you have new blood in there that maybe hasn't been accustomed to this.
Mm-hmm.
Because it brings a different perspective. But there is like, yeah, in a family business, like, let's face it, you can say things to people that you couldn't normally say because you get written up in HR, right? There's emotions that go on, but it's a good thing. Like, I mean, like at the end of the day, like we're all, you know, we see each other. It's cool because we see each other in the office. People ask me, dude, how do you work with you and your wife work together? Is that contentious? And my wife will tell them, no, actually, even when we're having a difficulty in the marriage or something, like we still are great at work. Like we could still work together just fine um, because it's still got to get done. But there is a lot of gray area. Like I think that's the struggle with family businesses is there is a lot of gray area. Like you go to a corporation and it's like, hey, you're a project engineer. This is what you do. You do this. You get information, you upload it onto some construction software, Procore or whatever, send it out, and then the masses get the email and they respond to you, and then you distribute it again, right? Well, no, that doesn't work here. Like here, you know, for instance, I'll find myself in a contractor's, lobby talking to estimators one morning. Then I'm on a job walk at another, a couple hours later. Then I'm back in the office, trying to, follow through on some bids with contractors that I'm, courting or whatever you want to call it. So we wear a lot of hats, and I think that as long as everybody is, willing to pull their fair share, like there's so much synergy that comes with that, and that's I think the power of communication and it's and I think that's what's so exciting is there's me and my wife, there's the two of us, and then we have her cousin he's our age, and then we have the aunt and the uncle, and then we have another uncle in estimating, so it's actually pretty fun. I mean, we all like sports, so we follow teams. There's discussions. We'll put I probably shouldn't say it. Well, I should say it because you guys beat us and took us out of the playoffs this year with the Dodger game. You guys Diamondbacks, man. You guys, I don't know what you guys were on some good.
They're on a good
Pretty
run.
hot, man. Yeah, it
Had
was
to put
great,
the
man.
sweep. Had to bring some brooms out for that one, man. It got a
Yeah, you
little
know,
nasty out there.
but that's what makes it fun, right?
Yeah.
So we're watching games here in the hallway we have a big, you know, bid
Hey, you got
calendar
Shohei
that's,
Otani, so just relax. You'll be all right.
yeah, it only cost, yeah, that's an interesting, we could probably do a whole
Yeah.
podcast on that and how that's probably going to change baseball and contracts.
It's going to change everything now.
Oh yeah.
No one was mad at the Dodgers for doing this for the last few. Like Freddie Freeman, right, has a similar deal, and then all of a sudden now, it's like Shohei comes in and it's like, okay, well, now we got to look at this because the Dodgers have gotten creative. But
Yeah. Yeah. And supposedly he penciled that whole deal out. So anyways,
yeah, he
you
did.
know, but I'll be down there for spring training. And by the way, I was listening to a podcast you were on, I think like 2 years ago. It was, what are the guys, Nick and John and Tyler,
Yeah, the modern craftsman.
the Modern Craftsman. And so I was listening to it, and you were talking about like, oh yeah, one day I'll build my house. I think it was in 2021 when you did it. One day I'll build my house, and I'm going to start an iron company. And I think when I saw you, you're like, oh yeah, I got the iron company's up and running. He's got the properties ready to build. Like it was cool, man. It's cool to see you had that vision back then, and now you're executing. So that's awesome.
I appreciate that. I think
Yeah,
with anything, it's like as you mentioned, it's early days. You have a vision, and you're like, "Whoa, this is," it's a little bit harder than I realized, and it takes time. And just that's why I tell everyone, just takes time. Be patient, be consistent. I think that's just a life application, right? Be consistent in everything
right.
you do, and but understand that you have to have a vision for where you're going as a company. And fortunately, I have some great people around me, that work really hard and share that same vision and allow us to get to that. And so it's been fun, man. It's been good, and I think that's where anyone listening. You went through the statistics, David, and I think it's pretty fascinating because I'm like, I know so many companies when and it's not all companies, but you see this on occasion that mom and dad have started a company and there's a grind that we're talking about. There's a grind to build a company and it's your baby and you're always answering the phone. And there's this like heightened sense of your business because you built it and the pitfalls and the mistakes and all these things to build your business. So when generation two comes in, they may not be as acutely aware of like what you've dealt with and the pains to get to this business. And it's hard for them to kind of navigate those treacherous waters, right? Because
Right.
and then that third generation is even harder and fourth almost impossible. When you say 2 or 3% on that fourth generation, it's kudos to you guys and what you've done there at Continental Marble and Tile to say, hey, we're 100 years. We have a commitment. And you've had a process, and maybe you break this down because I know when you were out here and you and I were talking in person, you said, hey, there was this long time that we're the lowest bidder. You said that on the podcast now for a while, but you're also building relationships. You're kind of navigating away from that, realizing that there is value in building these relationships with GCs. I mean, how has that mentality changed and the value add from that?
Okay, so my personality, right? Like I like the one on like the in-person meeting, like COVID kind of threw everything for a loop, right? Like everybody was afraid to go out of the house and talk to people. And so, the big thing for me is like I love I love stories, right? I love hearing the stories. I love hearing like the background, knowing about people and knowing where they came from because it kind of, you know, sets the stage for where they're at in their life today, right? And so, and I love that, because everybody's got a story. You've got a story of how you got how what made you decide to, you know, leave because you worked for a can
A general
right
contractor out here that
a
would,
GC, a
yeah, I work
commercial
for a GC
contractor.
for someone that would be like hiring you,
Yeah, exactly. And so, but like, and then I would go into Brad and get to know Brad real well because he was their lead estimator, and I'd want to, hang out with Brad and see what I can do to help Brad, just be not a thorn in Brad's side, right? That's my whole purpose. So, but because we've been such a low bid, we've been in the low bid world, we've missed out. I don't even want to say missed out because I'll be honest with you, like life's been great. Like we have a wonderful thing going, but like, you know, we're hungry. Like why stop? And it's not about greed or any of that stuff. I look at this company as like a vehicle to do cool things, and it's not even just like traveling or have a nice house or any of that stuff.
but you
That's
have employees and families and that you're helping
yes,
sustain.
but like every year we donate to toy drives. Like last night we were at one of our I don't know if you say company names on here, but we were at one of our
Yeah,
contractors.
you can.
So we were over at we dropped gifts off over at DPR Construction in Orange County.
Hmm.
We were wrapping presents with Erickson Hall. Like we get to do these cool things. We dropped canned food off. We usually do. This year was kind of weird because there were some sicknesses going through our office during Thanksgiving, but usually every Thanksgiving we're donating food to food drives, and that's what I mean. Like these are super cool vehicles. That this tile service that we provide has provided this awesome vehicle to do these cool things in our communities and provide lifestyles for all these guys. So when I got in the trade, I was 19 years old, and this is kind of a cool little story. But and I was a tile setter, apprentice tile setter, had a little Toyota pickup truck, had my wheelbarrow in the back, show up to work, and I had a daughter. Right when I was 20, we had our first kid. Me and my wife did, and my dad had passed away when I was 17 years old. So like, I didn't really, these are new waters to navigate, uncharted waters for me. But all these tile setters who were 40, 45 years old were like, they were telling me like, oh man, you don't change diapers. I'm like, no, but like, you need to change diapers. Your kids aren't going to talk to you. So these guys fed me all these life, lessons. But the cool part is when I went into, manage the management side and out of the labor side, like I was able to see one of these guys that, I drove to his house and on his last day of work, because he was retiring, and pick up the work truck from him and bring it back to the office. And, this is a guy who was like a staple in my life, as far as like just being a good, role model, a mentor. And there was, 10 or 15 of these guys, and even the guys in the office here, my wife's uncle and her two uncles and the guy, like they've all seen me grow up in the trade, so it's kind of a cool experience, especially it being a family business. It's just, I love getting up out of bed every morning and going to work. I love it. I love it every single day. I love the crap part of it. I love the wonderful part of it. I mean, it's just everything that it encompasses is so, for me, it's exciting. It's probably the toughest industry to be in, right? As far as manufacturing, you're making products, you're sending them out. We're dealing with a lot of human error, um, but it's so like it's refreshing to have, for me, because like I installed and I love that. I'm thankful that I have the opportunity to come into the office and prolong my life. I think it was Andrew Patterson from Patterson Custom Homes. He talks about like I just want to have enough chips to play. Like that's how I feel. Like I love it. Like I love coming and getting up every day and meeting these people. Like I'm going to tell you this, it's going to blow your mind. But the day that I went out to your house, your property, like I drove out to Arizona just to see your house, and then I drove home. I just made. I'm like, hey, I'm going to Arizona on that day. My wife's like,
I wish
okay.
you had
I'm
told
like,
me more time. I would have given you more
no, no, no.
time.
It's well, I'm going back. I'm going down there in March,
Yeah,
so
so I'll see.
I'll
So
give you a heads up. So, but no, but like and it's all good though. Like, but I'll do anything. Like, I'm not afraid to like, and that's why like going out and talking to these people. Like, I love it. Like, like I told you, I'll send you harassing text messages every so often when cool things pop up. Um, but like it's like the friendships and the your I don't know, your networking is like the greatest tool that we have, right? And even in the low bid world, like networking is great. Even if your markup maybe not be as great as these guys that are doing other types of work, but like for me, it's I love the tile industry. If I was in brickwork, I'd probably love the brickwork industry, but I love what we do. I love the atmosphere here. The guys in the field are great guys. So just every like kind of cog in the wheel for me is just exciting. I miss the field. Um, but I mean, I'd be lying if when I got out of my truck and it was 115 degrees, I was like, oh dang, those are the days I'm like, man, I'm thankful for air conditioning and I'm thankful for where I'm at. But the nice part is like it makes me appreciate those guys. Like my very next thought goes to those guys setting tile for us that are out there breaking down their bodies, ultimately wear and tear. Because when they're going to be 65 years old, they're going to have, thankfully for technology, like with the new stuff that we have for like knee pads and all that stuff,
Mhm.
like the quality of life for them is going to be a lot better when they get to that point. But like I'm
Yeah.
thankful for that. You know what I mean? Like I can remember when I was doing scheduling and running the field, and that was my role. I'd drive around and I'd be lying if I didn't say at least once a day I would have like an overwhelming feeling of gratitude just for those guys out in the field. Like, because they're like, we have that machine, but they're like the main fuel for that machine. And they're sacrificing a lot, to get up every morning. And, we're in LA, so everybody's up getting up at 4 a.m. to beat traffic to get to the job. At some jobs, they won't let you start till 7. So these dudes are taking these 2-hour naps in their car. And you're just like, you know, you have to appreciate that and love them for that.
Well,
So
I would imagine that gives you such a great perspective as a leader in the organization. And because the reason I say that, I always counsel like any young up and comer, let's say someone that wants to be a GC, or be in management, that you can't, like you can shortcut it, which some people do. But what I mean is for great perspective and understanding of what it's like for all the employees. Go work. Fortunately for me, I worked as an electrician. I worked installing bat insulation. So
Yeah,
I worked
that's
as an
horrendous.
insulator. It's brutal. It's the worst. Like I can't even tell you. It's so tough. And then I, doing low voltage and I did a little bit of framing, but essentially by being in the trades, like you mentioned, there's so much more perspective. Just having that mindset for years of showing up with my lunchbox, being hourly, right, and putting on the tool bag and working. And so now owning my company as a GC, I have a lot more, empathy and sympathy towards all of our trades and subs that are out there working, as you mentioned, these harsh conditions and timelines. And because I know it's like some days you don't feel great, and sometimes personal stuff's going on, and you still got to show up. And physical labor is hard when you're like, okay, got to get out of the truck and unload the tools and get moving. I mean, there has to be a mindset that clicks, and how can you reach that? How can you motivate that if you haven't done it yourself?
Right, absolutely, and just like having that appreciation. I mean, like never in a thousand years would I think of taking advantage of one of these guys. You know what I mean? Like it's just that appreciation for what they do. And if you look at it, I mean, they're your profit centers. Like if you're a contractor and you spit on your guys, I mean, they're your profit centers. They're where the rubber hits the road. And some of these guys, they've worked for us for 35 years, and that's rare.
Mm-hmm.
It's rare in the trades. So, but
How's it changed going back to? I know you said you want to come back to the handshake, to contracts and CYA. How much time do you spend now as opposed to 20 years ago as a company going through bonding and all the specifics to be pre-qualified and insurance? I mean, all these GCs you're working for now have massive pre-qual kits that you have to be certified through, pay
right.
structures that you have to get familiar with, and how you do your invoicing and billing. I mean, it's difficult to track all that for so many different customers you're working for.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like that. I guess it's kind of like inside the infrastructure of us, it's like everybody needs to stay in their lane, right? Like Megan does all of our billing and all that stuff, and she's familiar with all the different formats, Textura, and all these other
It's a
wonderful
lot.
things that are developed, right? And then on the bidding side or the management side, you've got to learn all this, these different softwares, because every contractor has their favorite. So it is a challenge, but like, I mean, and you think about like I can, I was talking to Patty. She's she's Aunt Patty, the owner, right? One of the owners. I always say that, one of the owners. And she's like, I remember when contracts were one page, and now they're like it looks like a dictionary. Some of these contracts, and every single, and usually those big thick contracts are geared to release the builder of any type of exposure. So you're inheriting it all as as a subcontractor. A lot of it, when it comes to that part. And so we go through those contracts, we mark them up, and we send them back. And I don't know, some subs might just sign those contracts and send them back because they're like, oh, I can't fight against a big machine. Well, no, I mean, so there has been that change. But you know going from the handshake to the paperwork and CYA, it's, I mean, even like sign, it's, there's always a hiccup. There's always going to be a difficult job, whether it's the plans were poorly put together or whatever, and you have to navigate through that, and sometimes you're just not going to win on all of them, right? So there are a lot of change orders that we get signed that we don't get paid for because of oh, that should be in your scope of work. And so it's kind of like, okay, how much do you want to rock the boat and fight over this $1,500 on this $300,000 job? Like, yeah, okay,
Mm-hmm.
let's just all move past it. And you know we have the end goal in sight, right? And that's to do another project with you guys. So, but
How
I will be
Go ahead.
but like I will be honest, like, and that's kind of what shifted some of my focus from just punching out bids all day, all day, all day to this relationship stuff. Because I had an experience. We built these two hotels in Oceanside side by side, the North Tower, South Tower. They're right next to the pier. They're beautiful. And this contractor that we worked for, this was the first job we did with them. And they're big. They're a nationwide contractor. And so like project of this size is like no big deal to them. But this was our first experience with them and theirs with us. And we both walked away from that. They actually, it's funny because they actually gave us the first tower. They gave us a contract on the first tower, but they didn't award the second tower. They kept that like in the back because like, well, we'll see how they perform on the first tower to see if we're going to give them the second tower. Well, they ended up giving us the second tower in a change order, but like, and that contractor, I literally just started talking to, and because I personally wasn't set up to start, taking on and bidding, because I didn't know our bid software. I didn't know, and I don't want to dump this load on our estimators. Like, hey man, I brought this new contractor and I know you guys are pumping out 500 bids a year. Can you make it 600 now? So I learned the software. And so now, but they were the guys that kind of reinstilled. There's actually a few builders like that have reinstilled faith in me that, like, hey, we can have a conversation on the job and we'll start moving forward with it because of time constraints. And that's usually what kills you on these jobs, right? Is, hey, the job's got to get done by this day because either students are coming in or people are going to jump on rides that day or whatever the case may be, kickoff, whatever concert. So really the end date doesn't move even no matter what problem happens on the job. So you're kind of pressed by time that you have to do these things so that my tile gets done, because then you're dealing with liquidated damages and all that stuff. And we don't want to deal with that. So we move forward with good faith. And, but like we have had those experiences where we do have a conversation in the field, and a lot of them, with these builders. There's a few different ones that are hands down awesome. I call them, they're like cowboys, man. They're just out there in the field shooting, like, yeah, get that done, and then we'll follow up with an email, and it's honored. And so that to me, and that's kind of where the shift for me was. At the time, I wasn't even doing estimating. I was running the field. I was the field supervisor at the time, doing all the scheduling. That's when I said, hey, when I get in that position, I'm going to go after this contractor because that's who I want to do business with. And so like I said, we have that machine. We're competitive. And now it's just time to start opening up a new kind of arm in the business. And that has to do with relationships and doing work, and for these contractors that we can pick and choose, who we work for at that point. And
Well,
they're big projects.
yeah. Well, you mentioned, I mean, you're working for so many different GCs all throughout Southern California. What separates, when you mentioned some of the builders are super awesome to work for? What's that separator, to differentiate them from other ones?
Um, like, I'll be honest with you, I don't even want to say it's the builder necessarily. I think a lot of it has to do with like the plans. If the plans are, if they're rough and they're not drawn properly and they have too many scope gaps, like, everyone's just going to be in trouble on it. So it's, and unfortunately, for the end user, the owner, if those plans aren't great, when everybody goes to bid it, everyone's going to bid it, to cover their butts just in case for the unforeseen stuff. So really, I don't, necessarily think it's, a builder's business model is to, hey, I'm going to screw all my subcontractors. That's my business model. I think sometimes that just kind of, happens because of time constraints. We don't have time for, clarification because it's not recognized until we're in the field, because I mean, we all know you can draw it on paper, but sometimes it just doesn't marry properly in the field. And so we do have to go through some sort of correction and, so I don't want to put it on them, but I think that, maybe there are some contractors that do a lot more pre-construction qualifications and due diligence on their end to make sure that there are no scope gaps. And if they are, they have a contingency, fund that they can dip into or something. I'm not, I'm not on the GC side. I love being a sub because I can get in and get out and not have to deal with like a nightmare owner or any of that stuff. So we won't be going to any GC side anytime soon.
From your days in the field, looking back, do you feel that the project management, whether organization, in addition to the plans, the supervision, the superintendent, the PM that's on site, how does that impact your role as a subcontractor?
That's an awesome question because there are so many like jobs. We do work for, like you said, numerous builders, and the builders that are, I can, when I walk onto like a Neff Construction or an Erickson Hall I know it's one of their jobs because all their jobs are the same. It's funny because when I was in the field, when I would sweep out a restroom, because, there's wood shavings and all that stuff, and they're never broom swept when you get there. So
Right.
whatever. So we sweep them out. But it's funny because for what I sweep out of a room, I could tell you like, oh, that's a Neff job, because all their jobs are exactly the same, even down to the scraps of material you're sweeping out of a room. Erickson Hall, same thing. So I think a lot of these companies that have been around for a while and have established very healthy, protocols, like that's, it's so uniform. And yeah, you're gonna, like I said, you're gonna have some black sheep in there where it's odd, like what happened on that one? Oh well, it was a remodel on a job, and the walls weren't straight, so we had to spend a ton of time fixing walls, and there's no money in it for that. So it's those kinds of things, but those are rarities. And so for us, like, we know going into certain people's jobs that, like, they're going to be the same. you know they're all the same. It's like, I don't know if it's a training that they do, but and that makes it easier for us as a sub, especially in the low bid world, because we know what we're walking into. Almost can, like, almost blindfolded, because they're so you know oriented by their setup and their takedown and their fencing, and I mean everything. So that makes it easier.
As far as bonding goes, are you required to bond every project that you bid?
No, not necessarily. Some people, like, I mean, there's one contract that, if 250,000 is over 250, you got to get a performance and payment bond. Some of them want a bid bond, not all of them, but there are certain contractors that do want certain ones. We usually know who they are, but
And walk through the
bonding.
bid bond. I think some people may not be familiar with what a bid bond is.
So basically, we get a bond that if we back out of our bid and it causes, like let's say that we bid a job and it's like we bid it at 100,000, and they select our number, and then some other guy behind us is at like 250,000. We're like, oh, we missed all that. We're out of here, and we back out. Like, they're going to go
Mm-hmm.
after our bid bond company for that difference in that bid to cover their
Yep.
butts, because they're not going to eat it. So that's what a bid bond is. So what's interesting is, bonding companies will be very particular, because they know, like, hey, you guys are new to, like, if you're new to it, it's going to be difficult getting bonded because you don't have any history. But if you've been in business for 15 years or 5 years, 10 years, they're going to know, like, okay, Brad from AFT knows his crap. Like, we'll bond him up to $5 million, $10 million, $50 million, because he's building these 35,000 square foot home, and the neighbor next door to him is 25,000. So he's going to build those two. We got to give him enough bonding capability to handle that. Oh, and the other, five or six, 10,000 square foot homes that he built. So, it's just history, and qualifying for it. And then, being able to execute. Not, I mean, we have, like, knock on wood, but I can't remember there's never been a job that we haven't finished, like, never, that we've pulled off, or we just, I mean, thankfully our owners, George and Patty, both have that same, like, hey, just get it done. Like, it's been in our best interest to stop arguing over it and just get it done. And so we do, you know, so.
It's incredible. It's awesome. So, what for those listening? I mean, you mentioned a couple to me, but what are some of the signature projects maybe you're proud of, or at least proud to have your company associated with there in Southern California?
Oh man, Helix High School. That's one, right? um, no, but with that being said, it is kind of cool. Like, my mother-in-law, so my wife's on her dad's side is a fan, the side of the tile, but on her mom's side, they're all educators. Like, all my sister-in-laws are teachers. My mother-in-law worked in the school district, and, like, we've remodeled the school that I went to, Nogales High School. We did that remodel. The State Elementary School, the school I went to. Those are cool because they're personal, and it's like, but my kids always joke, and it's that joke about, like, oh, kids, I did that building right there as you're driving by on the freeway. My kids always, when we go through downtown, are like, okay, Dad, here it goes, Dad, go ahead. But some of the signature projects we did, we worked on SoFi, and for all transparency, there were 4 tile contractors on SoFi. The tile scope was so big, I don't think one contractor could bond
Could
it
do it
all.
all. Yeah, it's too
Yeah,
much.
so, but I will tell you that we had the second largest package. The 2 lower packages, if you added them up, they won't even come close to what we did on there. And between us and the guy that did the most, there's only maybe $2 or $3 million difference in our packages.
Wow.
So we did the SoFi. That was a super cool job. I loved going to that job and walking it, because it was such, like, for us, it was such an exhilarating for me. Like, we were hammering out so much tile in all the public areas, and it was awesome. Um, we did the recent Coliseum remodel, a couple years back. They remodeled the whole south side of the Coliseum, 7 levels. We did back of house stuff, suites, restrooms, common areas. That was super cool. We did the Metropolis development. We did those four towers, which is in downtown LA. Those were, oh gosh, I think the first one was like 42 stories. The next one was a hotel that was 20 stories, and then the next one was like 54 stories, and then like 62 stories. And we did all those, so that was kind of cool. All high end luxury condos. But oh gosh, man, I can go on. Like it's just cool. Like we've done a lot of religious stuff. For churches. That's always cool. But yeah, a lot of education. I mean, probably thousands of high schools and elementary schools, and I mean, it's just unreal the stuff that we get to see, and it's cool. Like the cool part about our job is like we get to go in. Like I don't even know if we're going to bid the job, but I went on a job walk to this former Staples Center. Now it's crypto. And it's kind of
Hmm.
cool to be. You go into some of these amusement parks. When no one's in there, and it's super cool to just kind of like be able to. I mean, that's the best time to be there when no one's there. So so we get that that experiences and it's great. I mean, it's we do theaters. We've done El Capitan and some other theaters in San Diego. We've
Hmm.
done historical stuff. We've done some landmark waterfalls in downtown LA that are symbolic for things off of Hill Street. I don't even you know it's interesting. It's just interesting all the stuff that we get to see, and it's like my day is never the same. Like it's always, even in the office, it's different when we see the plans for different projects. And we're doing a library down in San Diego right now, and it's got like all this handmade tile on the outside of the building, and then we got tile that's coming from you know uh, Spain, and that's just been like a nightmare because the company we're getting it from is doesn't seem to be set up to ship to the US. So it's like we're having all these uncharted, but it's cool. In the end of the day, when we're done with that building and everything's installed, and it's super cool to see and walk away from those projects that are done, and we're able to chalk another one up and play another day, right? So
It's incredible. I mean, it's amazing just the history there, the 100 years, the expertise, and just that transition to be fourth, now soon fifth generation is pretty amazing. So, what do you do for fun outside of building this amazing enterprise you
I just told you guys I love going to work every day. My wife will tell you that I work for fun, and then I figure, fit everything else in there. But we do. So we a few years back we bought a little surf boat. So we do a lot of surfing, on the lakes. I coach my daughter's soccer team. I sit on the board for the ASO, our region, local region for ASO. You always got to give back. And so like I love that. I work with the kids like at church. I serve with the youth of our ward, at our church, and so there's just there's never a dull moment. I would have thought, because we have four kids, and I would have thought when my three oldest kids left the house, because now we have so let me give you the ages, because you're going to be like, what happened? We have a 25-year-old, right? She's married. I have a 22-year-old who's in his junior year of construction management. And then I have a 19-year-old who's serving for our church in Texas right now. So she's on a year and a half mission. Um, and then I have my 10-year-old. So
have?
I have this gap right here,
9 year
actually my
gap.
9-year gap, and people are like, what? And so I would have thought that once the three older ones, and they were all involved with dance and sports and all that stuff. And we were there every step of the way, so we've had these fun experiences. But like my life seems to be more busy with the one kid than I did with the three kids. It's like, man, what is going on? But like, and I guess my favorite thing is spending time with my family. As we were taking my daughter, she did a year of school before she went out and served. When we were dropping her off, we were unloading her stuff, and one of our family friends was up there visiting her family, and she came over to help us unpack. And when she was talking to my daughter's roommate, my daughter Roxy, her roommates, she was saying, "Oh, these are the Guzmans. Just so you know, they do everything together." So like my son was there, my daughter, we were all, and we just like spending time as a family. Like, it's great to have adult kids and to see them grow and to have that. But like the relationship with them is there's no price we can put on it. And I'll be honest with you, having the family business has been huge in that, because all my kids grew up in the shop. My wife brought all the kids to the shop. There might have been contractors who heard baby noises in the background years ago when the kids were crying or whatever, but my kids were raised in the shop. My kids were around this, their whole life. So, it's been an awesome experience to have that, to where, we didn't have to always, leave them with somebody while we, went to work and did those things. So,
I was muted there. So
there we go.
yeah, my headphone disconnected. But I mean, to your point, David, I mean, just to be able to have that family environment where kids can be involved, they see the family company, they see how hard you and your wife work, the amount you give back to church and community and everything you guys are doing from a charity function. I mean, it's just impressive, and it really shows to the success you've had and what you built. And I know that you're super busy. Again, I appreciate you coming out to see us in Phoenix and coming on the podcast today and spending this hour with us and the audience, David. It means a lot. So for those listening, where can they find you?
I'm on LinkedIn. I don't really have much social media going on. We're probably gonna, because of our new trying to. When my son comes in here, he's like, "Oh, we got to do all this social media stuff," and I see all Brad's cool stuff he does on LinkedIn. So we're gonna have to put some stuff out there at some point. But I'm on LinkedIn. You'll find me on LinkedIn. David Guzman. I'm at Continental Marble and Tile. Um, but no, it's cool, man. And when I'm down there in March for spring training, we'll definitely have to come by. I told my wife about that house. That was ridiculous.
Yeah, you have to come see it. You have to bring her and come take a tour because
Yeah, for
it'll
sure.
pretty much be at completion. It'll be a good time to come walk through it. So,
Okay, cool, man.
well, David, you've been amazing. Can't thank you enough.
Thanks for having me, man. We'll talk later.
If you get value from the show, please support us by giving a 5-star rating and review on whatever platform you listen to. And I also have a favor to ask. We've had some incredible guests that come on and share their wisdom, their knowledge about their business. So if you have friends or family members that could benefit from those episodes, please share it with them, as well as any other business owners that you're networking with that could get value from the podcast or certain episodes. Please share those as well. Again, subscribe, make sure you're following. Any questions that you have, topics. We've had listeners reach out about certain guests that we should have on the show. Again, brad.l@aftconstruction.com. Email me for topics to address, guests that we should have on, and even if you think you'd be a great guest for the show. So again, thank you for all your support, and we'll see you next time.